Hey, what's going on, guys? Room Gaming here, back to another video. Today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Enhancement Shaman for Mythic Plus in Season 2 of The War Within. If you guys want to follow along with this video, go ahead and check out the link in the description of this video. It's going to be a link directly out to this guide. You can kind of scroll through, follow along with us as we talk about some things. And if you are watching this a little bit later, this is for patch 11.15. This will probably be valid up to at least patch 11.17 if you are watching this, down the road. There were probably some things that changed, like the rotation, the spec might even change in 11.17. Who knows? But most of the stuff in here should be accurate. I'd make sure to check the talents on Raider.io, see what some of the top Enhancement Shamans are running. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into it. So Enhancement Shaman is A tier currently. If you bring them up on Archon GG, you can see that they're about mid A tier. They're definitely doing better than a lot of the other specs in the game right now. It looks like they are the better spec of the two Shaman DPS specializations. Not by much, though. Ellie's in a great spot as well. If we want to take a look at some of their damage, if you scroll down here and just sort by DPS, we'll open this up. We can see that they are, they're contenders for like a top 3 spot, right behind Ellie Shaman in terms of overall damage done. We can see that they are in some of the highest keys right now. It looks like max keys are 21s at the moment, and they're right below that, highest key timed at a 20. So that puts them in A tier. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the pros and cons. So very first one here is they bring lust to the group. Every group's got to have it. And since you have it, that might just get you invited to a key right there. We also have a really good class buff that is new in the War Within is Sky Fury. And that brings mastery to your group. And it also has a chance to empower their auto attacks as well. So very strong class buff, especially for melee comps. So a lot of times you could just be invited just for this. We have pretty good single target and AoE damage. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the rotation. Good mobility with our Ghost Wolf. Very fluid, very easy to shift in and out of. A big swirly drops. You can normally just pop Ghost Wolf and get out of it very quickly. And we also have pretty good mob control. Capacitor Totem and Thunderstorm is a pretty good combo to use together. Just be careful with using Cap Totem because there is a DR associated with a lot of other class spells. So you don't want to be like overlapping this with somebody else's AoE stun because overall you will get less value out of the Cap Totem stun duration. But using these two back-to-back is typically a pretty good combo. And it really helps with our mob control. Taking a look at some of the cons here. It's a bloated spec. Shaman in general is just a very bloated spec, and that's due to totems. Now, I'd say Enhancement Shaman is... I don't know if it's more bloated than like something like Resto Shaman, but it definitely has more procs than Resto Shaman. So that's something that we will talk about here in a bit. There's a lot of things popping up on your screen, and it can be a little overwhelming. Another con, we don't have any sort of immunity. And that kind of ties in directly with the point below. We're considered one of the more squishy melee DPS specs. Okay, if we scroll down a little bit more, we can go out to our talent calculator here. And if we scroll down, we can see right here in the middle of the tree, we are running Stormbringer. So we are currently running Tempest. Tempest is going to have a 2-second cast time associated with it. And this will proc after every 40 Maelstrom that we spend. If we look at the white text here, we can see consumes Maelstrom weapon for increased cast speed. So just be aware of that this will use your Maelstrom weapon stacks. If you're not sure what Maelstrom is, it's up here at the top of our tree, our enhancement tree. And basically, whenever we deal damage with our abilities, we get these stacks of Maelstrom weapon, which makes our other abilities cast faster. It stacks up to 5 times, and at 5 stacks, basically, whichever spell you in a cast will be an instant cast spell, because it's 20% times 5 for 100% reduced cast speed. Or I guess cast time, rather. So this is going to be one of the things that we are tracking throughout our rotation. Make sure we're not over-capping on this. But we'll talk about this a little bit more later. Another time I want to talk about is our Awakening Storm. So Storm Strike, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning have a chance to strike your target for increased nature damage. Every 3 times this occurs, your next Lightning Bolt is replaced by Tempest. So we have 2 ways to proc our Tempest. It's through casting these individual spells here, or if we spend 40 Maelstrom. So this will be proccing quite a bit for us. Another thing I want to talk about is Conductive Energy right here. So you're going to be able to get the Lightning Rod effect if you take this talent, which you will, right? Because it's not an optional talent. But basically, we'll be able to put this Lightning Rod effect on different mobs, and they're going to take 10% of all the damage we deal with our Tempest, Lightning Bolt, and Chain Lightning. So you can actually spread this Lightning Rod around in between different targets, and they're all going to take that increased damage from whichever target that you're trying to focus down or funnel your damage into. So typically that big elite mob in a pack. So something to be aware of, something you want to be spreading. Now, we were talking about Maelstrom earlier. We are taking Raging Maelstrom, so this is going to allow your Maelstrom to stack up to 10 rather than 5. So we do get a little bit more of a buffer, I guess. And this is really nice because this is going to keep us from overcapping as much. And another thing that's really nice about this is this increases the damage of the spell that consumes Maelstrom by 5% per stack. So 10 stacks times 5%, up to 50% maximum. Another talent we're taking here is a Doom Winds on a 1 minute cooldown. And this is going to increase the chance that we can proc our Wind Fury weapon. And not only that, it's also going to increase the damage of our Wind Fury weapon by 10%. You're not sure what Wind Fury weapon is. It's up here at the top of our tree. This is one of the ways. This is like an imbuement that we put on our weapon. And this is essentially going to allow us to just attack more with our weapons. Now, this also has a stacking effect associated with it with Forceful Winds. The more that you Wind Fury in a row, within a 15-second window, the more they stack. Up to 5 total stacks at 15% per stack, which comes out to like 105%. And if we are taking Unruly Winds here, we get a third attack out of our Wind Fury weapon instead of the base 2. It also has like a storm effect associated with it, so it's good in AoE situations as well. Now, during our Doom Winds, basically all of our main hand special attacks will be proccing Wind Fury weapon. So those spells during your Doom Winds kind of go up in priority, right? Because we're going to be able to get more of these Wind Fury procs during a Doom Wind window. So for this specific build, I'll just say all of them. This is our Storm Strike, or Wind Strike, Ice Strike, Crash Lightning, Sundering, and then all 3 individual strikes from our Primordial Storm. So to simplify that for this build, it's going to be Storm Strike, Crash Lightning, and then Primordial Storm here. So let's quickly talk about that. So Primordial Storm stems off of Primordial Wave, and your Primordial Wave will generate 5 stacks of Maelstrom weapon. Now, not only this, if we go down to Splintered Elements, it will grant us 10% haste plus 4% for each additional targets blasted by Primordial Wave. So what we want to do is we want to spread out our Flame Shock. So if we come up here to Lava Lash, and it's actually a talent that stems off of Lava Lash, but it is used through the Lava Lash ability itself, Molten Assault. So if Lava Lash is used against a target affected by your Flame Shock will spread to 5 enemies. So we want to make sure that we're spreading out our Flame Shock before we Primordial Wave so that we can get that haste spread from Splintered Elements. Now, going back to Primordial Storm, which is the whole reason we're here. So after we use Primordial Wave, it will transfer into something called Primordial Storm. This is a single-use effect, and this is going to send out a Flame Strike, Frost Strike, and a Storm Strike. And this will also send out a Lightning Bolt or a Chain Lightning at 150% effectiveness. Now, those strikes are what we're mostly concerned with here, and each of those strikes can benefit from this Doom Wind here. So all 3 of those strikes basically can get the increased Wind Fury weapon proc chance. So you want to try to overlap these 2 as much as you possibly can. And it's not that hard, right? Because this is on a 30-second cooldown, and then Doom Winds is on a 1 minute cooldown. So every other Primordial Wave, you should be able to synergize or sync up with Doom Winds. So during that window, right, you want to try to fill every GCD with a main hand strike. And again, the more targets with Flame Shock, the more haste that we'll get out of Splintered Elements. It will just allow you to get more of these Wind Fury procs out. So that's kind of how everything synergizes together there. Now, at the bottom right-hand side, we're running Thorm's Invocation. This is going to kind of go hand in hand with our Ascendants. And during Ascendants, our Storm Strike actually converts to something called Wind Strike. So what will happen is that Wind Strike will consume up to 5 Maelstrom weapon stacks, depending on how many you have. And it's going to discharge out a Lightning Bolt or Chain Lightning at 100% effectiveness at your enemy. At the bottom, it says whichever you most recently used. Right, so this is kind of dynamic. It can kind of cast the appropriate spell based off, your target count and what you've been casting. So you can send your Wind Strike and you can send your Tempest, right, whenever they proc. I did just kind of want to go over how that worked. Okay, let's go ahead and go over our rotation priority now. Okay, if you skip to this section, I would go back and just watch what we just talked about in the general gameplay, like how it's played, because I'm not going to go over all that stuff again. Specifically regarding Doom Winds, Lava Lash into Molten Assault, and then Primordial Wave into Primordial Storm, and then, of course, also Splintered Elements. So those 3 parts you kind of want to look into before you get to here. So, single target, you're going to make sure that your Flame Shock is on the target, because you cannot use your Primordial Wave without a Flame Shock up. And then from there, we're trying to trigger that Splintered Elements that we just talked about for that additional haste through Primordial Wave. And then once we cast Primordial Wave, it gets turned into Primordial Storm. So we have this Doomwind's Primordial Storm window that we're trying to work around, and we're wanting to fill this window with as many main hand casts as we possibly can. So if you remember from earlier, right, Primordial Storm is going to grant us 3 main hand strikes to get additional procs of Wind Fury Weapon through Doomwinds. And then we're using Ascendants to get that Wind Strike that's going to give us a ton of Maelstrom generation in a very short window. Now you want to be careful in this window because you're generating so much Maelstrom that it's very easy to overcap. So you need to make sure that you're sending that Maelstrom with a Chain Lightning, Lightning Bolt. This is single target, so it'd be Lightning Bolt or Tempest. And then AoE, you just replace that with Chain Lightning or Tempest. So this window or these steps right here is your setup. And then step 7 down is once you start kind of getting everything set up and you kind of start sending damage, right? So back to Maelstrom Weapon. Again, we only want to cast Maelstrom Weapon or use Maelstrom Weapon at high stacks. Again, that is due to our Raging Maelstrom here. The more stacks, the more damage. So make sure that you're using this at 9+ stacks. Be very careful not to overcap on Maelstrom. If you get a Tempest proc, just go ahead and send it. If not, we're using Lightning Bolt at 9+ stacks. Another thing you're going to be careful of is to not overcap on Storm Strike charges. So you always want 1 ticking. So if you're at 2 charges, go ahead and send one of those. Now, when we get down to step 9, this Electrostatic Wager comes from our tier set. And what you want to be doing is when you do get this proc, we're going to funnel Crash Lightning into this proc. And you're going to be doing that in both single target and AoE. So this procs after we lose the winning streak from our tier set. And again, we got a 3-second window, and Crash Lightning is what we want to focus on during that 3-second window. This is something I would recommend to track. We'll go over the tier set here in just a bit, but just know if that does proc, we're going to use Crash Lightning. We also have Voltaic Blaze here, which is another way that we can spread our Flame Shock out. This is proc. This is going to be based on a proc, so that's why I didn't talk about earlier as like how we should be spreading our Flame Shock. It's not super reliable for that, just because, again, it's based on a proc, not always going to be up on pull, right? So you normally use your Lava Lash to spread out Flame Shocks, but in case this procs, this will do a significant amount of damage. This also does generate 1 stack of Maelstrom weapons, so when this procs, go ahead and use it. Then everything below here is just going to be filler, so Storm Strike over Lava Lash, Crash Lightning, Flame Shock, and then during movement or something, you can use Frost Shock. And then in terms of AoE, things stay the same pretty much. The only thing that really changes is you're swapping out Chain Lightning you're swapping out Lightning Bolt for Chain Lightning. Now, another thing that does kind of change is up here, we were casting Lightning Bolt at 9+ stacks of Maelstrom, but in AoE, we are sending Chain Lightning at 5+ stacks of Maelstrom. So anytime that we can make Chain Lightning instant cast, it's going to be worth it to send it, and we don't want to hold on to stacks in AoE. Outside of that, pretty much everything's the same. We do see a small swap in priority, right, between Voltaic Blaze and Storm Strike. Voltaic Blaze had a little bit higher priority than Storm Strike here, and that is the opposite in AoE. Another thing that changes is Crash Lightning takes priority over Lava Lash pretty much always. You're going to see a bigger DPS increase casting Crash Lightning over Lava Lash, so anytime it's off cooldown, you just send it. It doesn't matter how many Electrostatic Wager stacks you have, you are just quite literally sending this on cooldown. Now, also, another thing that we haven't really talked about is you always want to make sure that you Crash Lightning in AoE before you Storm Strike or Lava Lash, because this is going to, basically it buffs your next Storm Strike or Lava Lash, but it only buffs them if Crash Lightning hits 2+ targets. So that should be everything from a rotational standpoint between single target and AoE. Quite a bit of overlap. Some things do change, but for the most part, pretty similar priority. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about consumables really quick. So your imbuements are going to be Wind Fury Weapon and Flame Tongue Weapon. That was probably pretty obvious. Flask of Alchemical Chaos. Most DPS specs are running this. Some are running Tempered Swiftness, but we are running Alchemical Chaos, Tempered Potion, Algari Healing Potion, Crystallized Augment Runes if you can afford them. Either of these 2 feasts, Culminating Blasphemite, and then Masterful Emerald. Again, you can just click the link. You can go through and read all this yourself. I'm not going to spend much time on it. And Enchants, we're running Greater Rune of Void Ritual. Main hand, we are running Stonebound Artistry. So that's going to be a mastery buff to our main hand. And then in the offhand, we're running the haste buff. So that's going to be Storm Rider's Fury. On our cloak and bracers, Yeah, Cloak and Bracers only. We're running Avoidance. We're running main stat on chest, Stormbound Armor Kit on legs, running Stamina on our boots, and then a double haste on our rings, the Curse and the Radiant Haste. Embellishments are going to be Dark Moon Ascension and then Dawn Thread Lining. Okay, let's go ahead and quickly talk about our tier set. Okay, your spells and abilities have a chance to activate Winning Streak, increasing the damage of Stormstrike, Lava Lash, and Doom Winds by 5%, up to 25%. So when that procs, these essentially do more damage. And then Maelstrom Spenders have a 1% chance to remove Winning Streak per stack spent. So when we do lose that Winning Streak, this is what we were talking about earlier, we will gain Doom Winds for 3 seconds. Now, when we gain this proc, this is when we're wanting to focus on that Crash Lightning. So your next Crash Lightning does 12% increase direct damage up to 60%, and you can store up to 10 stacks. Additionally, Crash Lightning does 75% increased damage to your primary target. So in single target, if we get a stack, then that prioritizes over things like Storm Strike and Lava Lash. But in AoE, it doesn't matter. As long as you get a stack at all, you're sending it. Okay, and then here's this graphic here that will show our force set, how much more damage are we getting from it from the previous season force set. So come down here to Enhancement Shaman. We are running Stormbringer in this build. So we can see down here on this bottom right table, this is the last season force set. This is the current season force set. And this is the row we're looking at here. Here we can see between the previous season and this season's, it's going to be a 12% DPS gain. So I'd say that's probably on the upper end of the DPS gains, looking at all the other DPS specs. Not going to be anything crazy like a Fire Mage. It gets almost 20%. But I think Enhancement Shaman has it better than a lot of the other specs. So decently strong. If we scroll down in the guide, we got just some general tips here. And then if we go down to stat priority, so let's quickly take a look at what our mastery is. So our mastery is Enhanced Elements. So it increases your chance to trigger Stormbringer and Wind Fury by about 0.5% and increases all Fire, Frost, and nature damage you deal by 16%. So mastery is going to be pretty strong for us. It's going to be our second stat that we prioritize behind haste. Obviously, you know, agility is going to be main stat. But since we are a proc-based spec, haste is going to be very important for us. The more spells that we can cast, the more procs that we get. And then with those procs that we get, mastery is what's going to be actually that makes them hit very hard through Enhanced Elements. Critical Strike is going to be pretty good for us if you're more focused on damage through Wind Fury Weapon. And then a versatility is going to be if you want a little bit more defensive.